Let's come back to a new horizon, which seems to have been set for Nigeria in its bilateral economic, trade, and business relations with the United Kingdom. With the passing of the late Queen Elizabeth II and the incoming of a new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, Nigeria is the UK's major outpost in sub-Saharan Africa and a major gateway into the continent. Professor Ken Ife is a development economist, and he joins me now to discuss the latest developments in the United Kingdom and what they mean for Nigeria's trade and investment portfolio. Good evening, Professor Ken Ife. Thank you so much for coming for this two-part conversation.
Oh, hi, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So we've got, we've seen the late Queen Elizabeth II. We're welcoming a new King, Charles III, and a new Prime Minister almost simultaneously in the UK. So can we say that this is the beginning of a new era in diplomatic, bilateral, economic, trade relations between Nigeria and the UK? Does it look like that to you?
Well, you could describe it as that, but I don't think we are going to lose anything. If anything, we are going to gain a lot more from the solid foundation that has been laid over the years, and particularly with the Brexit, creating even far more opportunities than anything you can think of. So while we mourn the death of Her Majesty and we welcome the incoming King Charles, who has been very much around and his views are well known, and he's pro-business, he's pro-stability, and he's pro-environment. So we know that we're going to have a better time going forward.
I want you to scratch the Nigeria-UK economic relations for me over the decades. Give me a summary of this relationship between Nigeria and United Kingdom.
Our relationship has been very smooth, as a matter of fact, and is actually a very, very close strategic partnership between UK and Nigeria in the context of Africa, in the context of ECOWAS, but it's a much, much deeper relationship now, given that the UK has left Europe. On two areas. One is on defense and security partnership. The overall objective is actually to capitalize on emerging economic opportunities and then to work together to resolve and address any security and defense challenges. So on those two counts, you have a defense security partnership. You also have a development forum, UK-Nigerian Development Forum. Now, in April 26, there was the seventh joint ministerial meeting between Nigeria, led by our Ministry of Finance and National Planning, and also the FMITI minister, and then their counterpart in UK. And at some point, the chief trade negotiator joined them with the customs. And then, of course, on the other side, you had the envoy, the trade envoy to Nigeria, and the UK Commissioner for Trade for Africa. So they're working together, and I can tell you that the opportunities to even do more is monumental, given the circumstances that they've left Europe, and that Nigeria also has the largest number of African diaspora in UK, and they're very active. What we need to do is to engage them more in some of this dialogue. And what we also need to do is to ensure that this dialogue going on and negotiations going on, that the private sector have a look in. If they don't have a look in, I can tell you it will be another missed opportunity. And I have so many reasons to say that.
Well, when many Nigerians will perhaps argue with you that perhaps Nigeria has had a stronger bilateral trade and business relations with the US rather than Nigeria in terms of what we get. So, on the balance, on the scale, do you think Nigeria has really been the better for it since independence in terms of our relationship with the United Kingdom, being a member also of the Commonwealth?
Oh, I'm not quite sure that's correct. Actually, that situation has moved For example, in the last capital importation report, UK did about 51% of the trade. Capital importation, about 51% from UK. And secondly, in this year, UK is on the G7 presidency. We've seen UK investment group with other G7 groups promise $80 billion investment in Africa private sector. Then we've also seen $2.3 billion from UK investment group coming here for infrastructure. We've also seen UK give $35 million support to Africa Continental Free Trade. So there are actions, there are things going on, and they have actually, for them to appoint a special envoy, a trade envoy to Nigeria, and then also for a Nigerian to be a minister in UK in this area of trade, it's a momentous opportunity. And I've lived 40 years of my life in the UK, and I have worked very closely with the Queen, the King, King Charles, and in many capacities with the UK government. And I've also helped to move a lot of Nigerians, our councillors, members of parliament, members of House of Lords. We are embedded in that geopolitics. So we want to make more economic sense of that relationship. And I think the opportunity is here right now.
Professor, the UK is deepening its economic and bilateral trade and investment with Nigeria. Is Nigeria doing the same across the Atlantic into the United Kingdom?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Sorry.
Yeah,
say that again.
United Kingdom is deepening its trade relations with Nigeria, which is about $3.2 billion and has a number of programs. For example, the UK manufacturing development relationship with Nigeria and all of that. So my question is, are we doing the same? Is Nigeria doing the same across the waters, across the ocean, back into the UK?
It's left to us to do more, because we have the advantage that we have, as I said, is look at ECOWAS. We are over 60% of ECOWAS, both in terms of economy and in terms of population. Look at Africa. Africa Continental Free Trade, we are nearly 20%, both in terms of population and in terms of economic size of the economy. Now, one thing that is very remarkable is that there are 90 million MSMEs in Africa. 42 million of them are from Nigeria, which means that we are even punching beyond our weight at 48% of the entrepreneurship in Africa. So entrepreneurship is a latent competitive advantage. So you can actually see why they have chosen Nigeria as a strategic partner to UK, has taken us to actually go into Africa. There are other competitors, without a doubt. For example, South Africa is number 2. And why? But the thing is that South Africa is a very mature, industrialized economy, but in decline. Nigeria is huge, both in terms of mineral and natural resources, and is just a sleeping giant that is about to wake up in that respect. But having said that, though, the service industries in Nigeria are actually driving not only our growth, but could define the relationship between us and the United Kingdom. For example, in the area of ICT, you've seen that Nigeria is number 1 in terms of tech hubs in Africa. Nigeria is number 1 in terms of private equity capital coming into the tech arena. Nigeria is also number 1 when you look at many other areas of investment. Then you look at Nollywood, the creative and cultural industry. That is gone global. So there are areas in education where Nigerians are overrepresented in the United Kingdom compared to other African countries. So there are many service areas that are crying out for investment and are ready to, and are what is actually driving Nigerian economy. Non-oil growth are also driving the economy. Service sector is getting us over 54% of our GDP. So we have so much more to do with United Kingdom in those areas.
Okay, stand by, Professor Ken, if you and everyone. When we return, we'll track Nigeria's investment summit holding tomorrow in New York. We'll also talk more about Nigeria's UK economic relations, about whether we have something on the horizons. We're back, everyone. Give us 2 minutes.
4 million hectares of arable land, over 200 million people, one nation. Home to Africa's fertilizer company. Dangote Fertilizer, pure urea fertilizer. With one single-minded passion to feed Nigeria. Every bag is a potential, an aspiration to turn this green nation into the biggest food basket of Africa. Dangote Fertilizer.
The Duchess International Hospital opened its doors in October 2021. The mission of the hospital is to reverse medical tourism. We take particular care here at the Duchess to bring together a combination of the brightest and the best locally, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora who are interested in returning to do very good work for the benefit of our patients here in this country.
The good thing is that we have all international expertise here, all international facilities here, international people working here. Everything is coming together in a space which was considered not great in terms of the availability of healthcare.
Access Bank, of course, has been able to provide us with a robust range of products and services that has enabled us to deliver that standard and quality of healthcare that is integral to our mission as an organization.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari will be speaking tomorrow, Thursday, in New York at a high-profile U.S.-Africa investment summit on the sidelines of the ongoing UN General Assembly. In the meantime, the country's bilateral and trade relations with its former colonial master, Britain, is worth £3.2 billion, goes into a new era. My guest in our Abuja studios, Professor Ken, is continuing this conversation with me. Professor, let me ask you, when you talk about trade and investment relations, the first thing anyone who's going to do business with you will ask is, what's your trade policy? It's my question. Where's Nigeria's most current trade policy?
Well, the last trade policy we had is 2005. And normally it should be in the 2007. You have to be every 5 years. You have to be reviewing your trade policy, updating it every 5 years. We did the one of, we didn't have, 2002 was the last one. 2007 we could have done, it wasn't done. 2012, I was among the 5 professors that wrote the trade policy. I actually wrote on trade facilitation. But Aganga, the minister, didn't put that to the Federal Executive Council, and we missed that opportunity. Then another 5 years gone, and today we are waiting to do. So it's very important that you have a trade policy to inform people that you want to do bilateral trade and investment on what your policies are. And it's not good enough that you don't have it. Even within ECOWAS produced a regional trade policy Nigeria couldn't sign. And again, that demonstrates that we are just not ready. But then we have still signed many other treaties. We have even signed many other conventions. We have signed the WTO, World Bank, WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. I was actually, in 2011, the UK DFID trade advisor to Nigerian government. So I worked on that and took the country around that process for us to sign. Now, in the context of AFCTA now, there's great urgency for us to be very, very clear about where we are going, because investors will be, that's the very first thing a board of big companies want to know. What are their policies in this area? Oh, you want us to commit so many billions, but what are their policies in this area? They will ask those questions. And it's very important that we know what we'll get on with this business.
Nigeria is holding international trade meetings and conferences in in New York today, tomorrow at the UN General Assembly. What are the optics for you on these talk shops?
Yeah, there's very promising, but in the context of our discussion today, UK does not have to go to New York to know about Nigerian business and opportunity. They are here in Nigeria. They have a trade envoy in Nigeria. They have everything. They have a UK trade and investment and economic framework and dialogue and box. They're already happening. They're all here, and we are all there in UK. So we just have to close those loops and gaps. It's not about them going to New York to learn about opportunities in Nigeria.
So what would you expect us to put on the table right now when we don't have an updated trade policy document on the table? So what are we showcasing in New York? What's the backbone of our conversation?
No, we have so many things to showcase, that notwithstanding. We have captains of the industry that have to accompany you, because, you see, when I said initially that we shouldn't make this a missed opportunity, let me give you an example. In 1975, when ECOWAS was set up, it took 30 years till 2005 before they actually now decided to open up to private sector to have a look in. So it was, as far as they were concerned, it was government business. And then this is what happens. And it's also repeating itself. History is repeating itself in AFCTA, Africa FCTA, where the state parties are the only parties. You don't have private sector.
Was the EU not set up around the same time?
So you are doing negotiations. Yeah. Oh, yes, yeah, at the same time, yes. And at that moment, in 1975, the level of intra-regional trade was 10% in ECOWAS and Africa, and was 10% in the EU. But today, it's gone up to 70% in Europe, and we are still around 12 to 14%. Although there are projections that we could get better over the years, but we've had all this provision. But part of the reason, of course, is that 60% of the trade, intra-regional trade, is carried out by informal traders. But that notwithstanding, the main issue, my thesis is this: you have to get the private sector who actually produce the goods and do the trade to be engaged in trade negotiations, so that you can reflect their views, reflect their strategic priorities, and how they see this business being conducted. You don't just go and make it state show and then into bureaucracy, and then nothing happens. In the end of the day, we had programs that were struggling to happen. We had free movement of goods, trade, and services. We have more challenges at the member state level. We have ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme. That was a challenge in implementing the thing. So many challenges. You have to get them involved early. And secondly, too, people tend to focus more on goods, trading goods. But you know that quality infrastructure and so many hostages and infrastructural issues around those, that you need to also bring in trading services at the very beginning, because we are doing well now in services. Nigeria has 5 unicorns. Unicorn is a homegrown company that becomes a billionaire in dollars within a short time. And we have five of them, and all in technology. So it means that we are ready to deliver this technology anywhere and everywhere, just as India is doing. And India is a dominating factor when you look outside America, in Silicon Valley. I remember Modi, the prime minister, was asked, who runs the world? He said, I don't know, but all I know is that the 100 biggest companies in the world are run by Indians. And when I went and investigated, actually, they succeeded Indians, and the people to succeed them are also Indians. So it tells you technology, how far we can go with that. And Nigeria has human resource, over 208 million people. And we have more business to do with UK in education, in health, and even in goods.
Professor, the question I asked earlier, and I'm very happy you allude to the Indians. The Indians and the Pakistanis have more industries. In the UK, Nigeria reportedly has more churches, religious worship places, more in the UK than the Indians and the Pakistanis have business, manufacturing, industrial concerns. Does that bother you?
Well, it does, actually, because I constantly hear about Church of God PLCs and all of that. But if that is the way you gain your entry, then so be it. But What we need to do is to use the leverage that we have. One, we have a very high population in the UK. One, we have a high level of educated people. So that means that education and health, because we have more doctors in New York and in Europe than we even have in the States, so use those, because those are potential that you have. It means that education can thrive between the two countries, because our tacit skills and potential that we have will be expressed in those value chains. But if you want to do that, you have to involve them. You have to involve in this negotiation this meeting that happened on 26th of April between the ministers, and then also at the level of the commission, the customs. And I didn't hear about any organized private sector being, in the mix, because you need to see the likes of Man and Nasima at the policy level, and then at the implementation level, you see the value chain champions. You see Nigerian UK Coconut Association, Nigerian UK Cashew Association, Nigerian UK, come down to value chain, where you can have the real operators talk to themselves and remove the obstacles so that they can express themselves in the supply chains, rather than wait. And it's all to do with how the custom treats them at the border, and then how they so different scenario.
Different scenario. Thank you so much for your insight and your time on the show tonight. We'll see you next time. Professor Ken Ife, Development Economist and Policy Analyst.